with your teacup.
Hi, team. We are, you are our last proposal for the day, so we're a little bit high on all the creativity. Um, and we just have talked about your proposal, and Sherry's going to lead us off.
Well, I think it's a very exciting idea. It's kind of common sense in a way. And actually seeing the development of Fernwood over the years, there's been a tremendous development of this, creating this new identity for Fernwood. And I think we sort of, at the Belfry, we feel that we are connected to a lot of what's going on here, specifically restaurants that are nearby. We recommend them and have great relationships with them and with patrons. So it's kind of recognizing what already exists, maybe formalizing it and building on it. I think absolutely strengthening our sense of being part of the community, which means recognizing the other parts of the community and building on bringing people to the community. Makes a lot more sense than marketing ourselves as kind of an isolated experience. Mm-hmm. It is a really exciting idea.
Yeah, I like the idea because it's a big idea. It's not just it doesn't deal with it doesn't necessarily deal with an immediate problem in an immediate way. It talks about a long-range vision. I could talk about the complications of actually moving the vision forward, but the interesting thing about it is talking about how you develop the neighborhood or the environment in which you exist to support what it is you do. And I think that the Belfry, to a large measure, helped create the neighborhood as it is now. I mean, Fernwood was always here. What it's never done is taken it, is found a way to coordinate with the existing organizations in the neighborhood of how it takes it to that next step. And there are obvious complications there in terms of how some of the residential neighborhood views that as an initiative in terms of how large a commercial district should exist in the neighborhood, those kinds of issues. And understanding the nature of the neighborhood as well. I mean, to a large measure, the Fernwood neighborhood is a neighborhood that forgot to leave the late 1960s. So we deal with issues in the square which reasonable businesses and, in fact, reasonable neighborhoods shouldn't have to deal with, but are largely ignored by city council because of the nature of what they believe Fernwood to be. So I think the really interesting concept is not so much how you develop business, because business develops business in neighborhoods where it feels it can be successful, but how you develop the neighborhood to change the attitude about itself. And that's where I kind of get from the idea when, we started a neighborhood business resource group here, and it's primarily been focused on parking, which is an issue for many of the businesses. Is to a certain extent for us, but less so. Now the challenge for me will be to see if I can transpose that thinking into how we actually develop a commercial neighborhood within the residential district and make it a destination neighborhood, make it more of a destination neighborhood and less of a place for, frankly, a few freaks to hang out in the square. The interesting part of it is the city uses Fernwood Square as a kind of centerpiece model for the city when it's marketing the city, but it uses it when the square is absolutely empty. And that's because it tends to be full of people that you don't actually want to advertise. Less so now than when the Belfry first started. So as a concept, I think what I'd like to see developed is how you actually encourage and move forward neighborhood thinking about businesses that are interrelated to our core business, so entertainment businesses. And those include Those include restaurants and include encouraging the city to dispose of community art galleries like the one that's across the street that's run by a couple of neighbors who happen to have free access to a building and believe that they're artists, and move it to giving it over to a gallery who can run it as a gallery. And that's not to say that they need to ignore local artists, but they need to be selective about them. How you encourage the city to really make the square a commercial center of the neighborhood rather than use the square as a photo opportunity. Those are the kinds of concepts that need further development in the big idea. Because I think that that's where the mileage is in the big idea.
I think the challenge is that there's that fine line between sort of the freaks that hang out in the square, or the people, I've been getting my hair done, and they've gone out to stop people from smoking pot, and the smell is wafting into their business in the salon.
Yeah.
Or in my kids' art class, right? Yeah. So, but the challenge is that there's a fine line between that and actually where a lot of the grassroots creative energy is coming from. So you look at someone like Terry, the Bubble Man, who is sort of this Fernwood fixture, and that's a fine line, though, between how you keep the character of the neighborhood, which really does have this sort of late 60s. There was a time where I could not mark business papers in the coffee shop.
Yeah.
And so how do you keep that how do you keep the character? Which I think still gives something to the neighborhood. That someone like Emily can, late 20s woman who opens an art school can do that in the square is because it's still reasonable, it's still affordable, it's, is in a way because the food's are there. So how do you measure the balance?
You see, I would disagree. I don't think that it's because the freaks are there. I think it's because it's a reasonably priced creative neighborhood. And what the city's never taken advantage of is developing creative neighborhoods. Most cities haven't. And the city of Victoria in particular has not. So things like leasing for $1 a year, 22,000 square foot building to the Fernwood Community Association, for them to do their own special little private projects in, is not a way you develop a creative neighborhood. That's how you encourage the freak factor to remain dominant. And I'm not, I say that. I say that judiciously. Like, some of the people who hang out in the neighborhood are interesting characters. There's no doubt about it, and add color to the neighborhood. And I don't think that it's a question of trying to get rid of them. It's a question of trying to encourage the serious creative enterprises that could exist in this neighborhood. Olympic Media runs a studio on 4th Street that does some of the most creative interactive media work in the city right now, and nobody ever goes there except the people who are actually working on the project. Because it's in a terrible neighborhood that nobody walks by. It's on 4th Street, and you go by it on a bus quickly. Whereas a neighborhood like this would be an ideal location for those kinds of things. It's inviting to walk in, that it has interest and the security of being in a residential neighborhood.
I'm just thinking, going back to your proposal team, the word partnership came up, and I'm just wondering about a sense in the neighborhood of, we talk about these people, and it's interesting because I almost get the feeling that in the hair salon, it's like there's that place out there. So that place out there doesn't really belong to anybody. There's not a sense of belonging and partnership in that space that sort of connects everybody. So sort of a grounding kind of thing here is creating that sense of partnership among the existing businesses, existing.
Yeah. And I think that started to happen with the creation of the Business Association, where we actively took a role in removing as quickly as we could all of the junk that's left in the gazebo as a so-called free store, which is literally people disposing of garbage and hoping like somebody will take it away. So the businesses got involved in that, and the businesses are forming partnerships. Like we have active partnerships, obviously, with restaurants nearby, with the hair salon across the street, because we do active business with them, and you try and keep that business in the neighborhood. The problem is the restriction on the number of spaces that are available for business. And you take away some of those spaces to do things like create the Fernwood Community Association, who have done nothing interesting in that building over 10 years. So you watch the rest of the neighborhood grow, and that remains static. And not to pick on them, because I'm sure they at least believe they perform a valuable service in the neighborhood. But there's a sense of the city actually going in and getting both the residents and the businesses to actively engage with that. And so the interesting, again, what I really like about the big idea is that it is about moving that long-term vision forward. This company once had a long-term vision that if you fix up this building and you created a performance space, it would somehow change the nature of the neighborhood. And it did. I think that you would be hard-pressed to find somebody who does not believe that the nature of the neighborhood, especially in this immediate area, was not greatly changed by the development.
Well, I would actually speak to that. I mean, because I've been here 16 years, and the Belfry was fixed up when it was still, when it was still a neighborhood where I wouldn't have been comfortable had I been at this stage of life and had kids.
Yeah.
Needles in the parks. To me, it was the building across the street. As long as that was a slum across the street, the neighborhood couldn't move up. And it was after this was sorry team, because it's getting into neighborhood politics.
You can see the kernel of your idea was very, very alive, because we're very inspired.
It was after that then that terrible restaurant that was always getting health violations, where you couldn't even order the fries, was bought, and the Fernwood Inn opened. So that, to me, the Belfry alone, it was the partnership of the Belfry and then the Fernwood Inn, the NRG coming in, that allowed it to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I won't deny that, but I also know that I speak on an ongoing, almost daily basis to Lee, and that neighborhood resource group would not have had the kind of resources that were happening if there wasn't an active interest in the neighborhood.
Right. Yeah, and the Belfry was the only thing there at that point. Yeah.
So, but keeping that vision in mind, creating this neighborhood as a destination, so people aren't just walking in, looking for parking and trying to find this building. They're coming
as soon as possible.
Yeah, they're having the experience is much broader than just what happens in this theater. Yeah. We like this.
Yeah, thanks team for all the debate and conversation. All right. We don't have advice for you for this week in terms of developing. Maybe some concrete next steps.
Yeah.
Would be a good development. Like, this is a great long-term vision. Now, what do Ivan and Sherry do on Monday morning? That kind of thing. All right. Thanks, team.